Well, hi there. My name is Dr. Trina Boice or Sister Boice, and I'm super excited to share a couple of presentations that I've submitted proposals for the 2026 BYU Education Week. I sent an email earlier and explained what the two proposals are about, and also mentioned I wasn't sure if I was required to send a video because I've been teaching for BYU-I for 15 years as an adjunct faculty, and I was just released as a service missionary teaching institute for Pathway. I've been teaching at the university level for 15 years for several different colleges, part-time adjunct for BYU-I for 15 years, and also for as a full-time instructor for Arizona College of Nursing and for Le Cordon Bleu Culinary College. And I am starting teaching also for South College, which is a college in where is it? Tennessee. Anyway, I love teaching. My doctoral degree is in management and leadership in with a concentration in higher education. And so I love teaching at the college level. I've taught on campuses as well as online. And I've even taught at BYU Idaho's Education Week several times over the course of several years. I know that they just discontinued that program, which is super sad because it's so great. But I absolutely love BYU Provo's Education Week because it's on steroids. And I've always wanted to teach there as well. I just moved to Utah. So now teaching at BYU Provo's Education Week will be super easy and fun. So, let me tell you about two presentations. So I'm really excited about both of them. And I'll start with the first one that I think is especially unique. And I think a lot of conference attendees will have never heard of this before. Let me scoot my notes over here. I've sent you by email the series title and the teaching points and all of that information. So I need to have my glasses on to be able to even read my notes. So this one is called Spiritual Insights from the famous Via Dolorosa pilgrimage path in Jerusalem, which it starts from Jesus's condemnation all the way to his crucifixion and resurrection. Now, a lot of members of the church have never even heard of the Via Dolorosa. Maybe they heard of a song which became familiar or popular a couple of decades ago, but they've never been to Israel or Jerusalem or even knew about it. And so I think people will be really interested because it's all about Jesus. And I'm just fascinated. I have done many, many, many hours of research on this to learn more about it because I think it is so interesting and because it is such a popular tradition among Christians, not Mormons or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints so much, but certainly with Christianity in general. And then I'll walk you through that presentation here in just a minute. And then the other one that I'm going to tell you about as well is called Exploring Where Jesus Walked, Touring the Holy Land Without the Jet Lag. And might I say, without the danger, because I was going to take a bunch of friends and kind of host their little tour, and they all backed out because it's getting really scary over there. So I know a lot of members of the church are have the desire to travel there, but it's scary, and rightly so. A lot of stuff has been going on. And so I think that this will be a safe alternative to kind of walk where Jesus walked. Anyway, I'll tell you about that a little bit more in just a minute. So this one I wrote as the description for this presentation about Via Dolorosa. I said this class will help class members to understand what the famous Via Dolorosa in Jerusalem is and why it has become such a popular pilgrimage destination for Christians for almost 2,000 years. Using the scriptures that describe the events of the Savior's last hours of his life and exploring the history and archaeology of Jerusalem, we're going to identify several key gospel principles that can help members of the church better understand the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ and to help them develop Christ-like attributes that were demonstrated during the final hours of his life, especially so through photographs, video clips, and my personal experiences, I will help the attendees explore unique insights about the Savior, incredible symbolism, and Jewish and Roman history that took place back then, and the lessons that we can apply to our own character and our own lives as we dive deeply into these last hours of the life of Jesus Christ during his mortal ministry. Now, because President Russell M. Nelson has encouraged members of the church to study the miracles of Jesus and the resurrection in greater depth, I think that this course will inspire attendees with new insights and ideas that will strengthen their faith and their understanding of these remarkable events and locations, and better understand God and covenants and just all that happened during those last few steps of the Savior. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so this is how I was going to break down the 4-day course. Now, I could try to squeeze everything into a 1 hour lecture or 55-minute lecture. If that's what you would prefer, I would talk really fast and quickly summarize some ideas and photos. But I would love to do a 4-day presentation. I would be thrilled with an invitation to do either. So for class day number 1, I'm entitling that one Significant Sites in Jerusalem and Introduction to the famous Via Dolorosa pilgrimage path. So the first teaching point is to teach a very short history of Jerusalem, what it looked like in Jesus's day, and what it looks like today in terms of topography and politics. Well, I won't go too much into politics, but what is happening in the country right now, in particular to this Via Dolorosa and what these pilgrimages look like. They're so sweet. Christians come from around the world. Some of them just quietly walk the path and stop at the assigned stations, as they're called, to learn about what traditionally is thought to have happened at that specific site. Now, we'll definitely talk about the archaeology. Some of the locations are absolute. We know they happened in a particular place. Other sites are based on tradition. When Emperor Constantine was baptized, a Christian, his mother was also baptized and wanted to go to Jerusalem and find these historical sites in the Holy Land. And she spent a lot of time and money and energy. And bless her heart, she did as much research as she was able, given the information that they had at the time. And so a lot of the information is based on oral tradition, although she did have her people go and try to look at the archaeology that existed at the time. And it's amazing how many more discoveries are being made in Jerusalem all the time, which causes us often to look from one site to another site as we uncover new things in that sacred land. So we'll talk about how the tradition of this Via Dolorosa came to be. She and her son went about in the 300s AD and started exploring and looking to see what they thought matched up with the scriptures. And again, bless her heart for really trying to understand the scriptures and identify these sites, because her desire and the desire of the Christians at the time was to go and to be able to walk where Jesus walked and worship and reflect on his life. Just the same thing that we want to do today. So she established certain areas, and Christians would go and have their pilgrimage and reflect and even worship at the site. And then centuries later, a different pope said, okay, this is These are going to be the stations. And so people flocked and they began actually doing a procession where they would start from station one, which was the condemnation from Pilate at the Praetorium. Now, the actual site of the Praetorium is hotly debated, and I will show pros and cons for each of the two generally recognized sites. But we'll talk about Pilate and Barabbas and the things that happened there at the Praetorium. And then the pilgrims who go to worship and reflect on Jesus's life will then walk to the next station, read scriptures, often sing songs. And today you can often see Christians carrying crosses as a group, and they'll take turns carrying the cross. There are monks I've seen do processions, and they read scriptures and they chant and sing songs as they walk from station to station. And so many more regular Christians will just simply walk and reflect, and they don't make such a big procession out of it. But each station offers a really unique opportunity to, again, reflect on what happened, whether it actually was there on that specific site, or just to really consider the things that happened at that location and the lessons that we can learn from the things that happened there. All right, back go the glasses. So I'll talk a little bit about a short history of Jerusalem then and now, and then what the scriptures teach us about what happened when Jesus was there. So teaching point number 2, I think I might actually have to move my notes over to this side because they're bumping into my microphone and my webcam. So teaching point number 2 is to talk about the history and the traditions of the Via Dolorosa in the old city of Jerusalem. And then what are the stations of the cross? Oh, so I mentioned that Emperor Constantine and his mother were able to identify certain locations, right? Centuries later, a pope said, all right, these are the stations. And so people continued to walk those 14 stations. And then decades, well, maybe centuries and decades later, a lot of Christians who really wanted to go and worship and experience this Via Dolorosa, which means the path of sorrows, they said, wait a second, not all of the things on the Pope's list are actually scriptural. So then the Pope said, okay, let's revise. And so then he introduced the 9 stations of the cross. Traditionally, people usually walk the 14 stations, but if you really want the scriptural representation of what happened, then there are 9. Either way, just walking in those steps where Jesus would have walked is an amazing experience. And I know that the members of the church today have that desire to travel there and to experience that. And my goal is, while teaching this class, to really bring in the Spirit so they can feel the tenderness, the symbolic power of these events and locations in Jerusalem. All right, so teaching point number 3 is talking about the very first station. Day 1, I'm going to try to cover stations 1 through 3. 4, depending on how much time we have, but generally I've organized it for stations 1 through 3. So on the station number 1, Jesus is condemned by Pontius Pilate at the Praetorium. And again, I mentioned that I'm going to talk about the archaeological 2 sites that are suggested or contended to be the actual Praetorium. And what happened there? The scourging, Barabbas being released, and many other things. I've got a bunch of scriptures I'm going to try to cover. Station number 2 is assigned to when Jesus was scourged, given the crown of thorns, and begins to carry the cross. And it is so heartbreaking. I think that some of the content will be a little heavy, so I'm going to mix it up, talking about the current Jerusalem, the shops, the interesting things there, the interesting things to taste, just so it's not such a heavy, depressing lecture. I'll mix that up and then certainly fill it with the Spirit with some really sweet experiences that I had and things that I felt while I was there. Station number 3 is when Jesus falls under the weight of the cross for the very first time. And what happened there? Uh, Simon of Cyrene was forced to carry the cross, or not, I shouldn't say forced, but the Roman soldiers told him, carry the cross, help Jesus. And so that begins a, a constant physical struggle. Now we know this Via Dolorosa actually took place after the emotional struggle, the spiritual weight of the cross in the Garden of Gethsemane. And after he had been sent to Caiaphas' house, and then he gets, goes back to the praetorium, and then that's when this official path begins. So day 2 is, I'm calling it exploring the sacred sites of the Via Dolorosa pilgrimage path in Jerusalem, stations 4 through 7. So teaching point number 1 is just a very quick review of day 1 in case there are people who missed day 1 and they don't know what the Via Dolorosa is. I'll just do a quick little summary and we'll start off with station number 4, which is when Jesus encounters his mother Mary along the way. And how heartbreaking that must have been for Mary to see her son with a crown of thorns and blood pouring down and being treated so inhumanely, spat upon and slapped around and beat up and all of that kind of stuff. Teaching point number 2 is Simon. Okay. That was teaching point number 1 is reviewing. Point number two is Simon of Cyrene being told by the Roman soldiers to help Jesus carry the cross. Teaching point number 3 is station number 6, which is an interesting story. It is not scripturally based, but it is absolutely could have happened. And it is when a woman named Veronica wipes the sweat and blood from Jesus's face. Now, there are symbolic and some scriptural references that allude to the veracity of this. Maybe it really did happen. Did it happen exactly where the station is located? I don't know, but somewhere along that stretch on that path. But there are some beautiful lessons that I want to share about that particular station. And again, if it's not true, there's still some really rich symbolism that did happen along that path. All right, so class number 3, day 3, I'm calling touring the traditional sites of the famous Via Dolorosa pilgrimage path in Jerusalem, stations 8 through 11. So teaching point number 1, we're going to again do a very quick review of what the Via Dolorosa is in case we have newbies attending the class. Then we're going to go on to station number 7, which is when Jesus fell for the second time. And there are scriptures that back up that he fell a recorded number of 3 times. So this is the second time and what might have happened along that path. And there are also reasons why he fell. Of course, he's carrying a heavy cross and he's been scourged and beat up and bloodied and exhausted from spending the night in the Garden of Gethsemane as well, right? But there were also interesting things along the pathway that might have tripped him up, especially in the third one, and we'll get to that one. Now, hopefully you're being able to tell that I could talk for days and days about all of this stuff. The big challenge will be to condense it, and then I'll have so much fun showing you pictures or showing the class all of the pictures of things. Teaching point number 2 is station 8. That's when, I already just said that. He falls for the third time. No, hold on, let me back up. Station number 8 is when Jesus speaks to the women of Jerusalem who are weeping for him. And that is scriptural, and it has great significance and symbolism as well. Teaching point number 3 is station 9, when Jesus does fall for the third time. Now, a really important reason why he fell and stumbled this third time was because he was passing over what's called Sheep's Gate, We know that this was during the Passover time, and the shepherds were literally outside with the sheep that were being sacrificed to bring into the temple. And there, with the gate, there was a little border or a little wooden uh, plate that they would have to walk over. And so, no doubt, Jesus would trip over that. But some really cool and significant things happened at that gate. And I'm also going to take time to talk about the Golden Gate, the gate that we know, or the Lamb's Gate, where we know the Savior is going to come through at his second coming. There are some really interesting things that have happened there historically at that gate, as well as what's happening there right now. Really cool goosebump types of things. So I'm really excited to talk about that. An incredible symbolism throughout. Teaching point number 4 is station number 10, which is Jesus is stripped of his clothes at Golgotha. Now, some people say Golgotha, some say Calvary, and this location is also very hotly debated. And I'm going to talk about that history and the pros and cons of the archaeological evidence that point to both of these locations. One is at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is inside Jerusalem, currently inside where that gate would have been, the gate would have been on the outside of it. And then the other place is what we call Calvary today, which is near the Garden Tomb. And I've been to both places, obviously, and I'm not going to share my opinion, I don't think so much as just point to the evidence and let the members of the class decide what they think, or maybe even open it up to question and answer to see if which attendees have been to both of the locations. Now, President Kimball was standing near the Garden Tomb area and said, this is probably the area or the vicinity. And so members of the church really lean towards that other location. But the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is really interesting, and it houses the last 5 of the stations. And it's really an interesting church. It's huge, and it has been rebuilt many, many times. And I'll teach the class attendees all about that. All right, and then on to day 4, it's called Walking the Sites of the Famous Via Dolorosa Pilgrimage Path in Jerusalem, stations 12 to 14. And again, those can all be hit in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or you could walk a path out a different way and hit Golgotha or the Calvary and the Garden Tomb area. So teaching point number 1, again, quick review in case anybody didn't go to any of the other classes. And then we're going to start with station 11. That's where Jesus is literally nailed to the cross. We're going to talk about the church and the artwork that's displayed at that station in particular, and also talk about crucifixion, how it was done, and how it points to the current temples today, which is super awesome. Station number 12 is when Jesus dies on the cross. And that's going to be a little bit tough, I think, for the class to hear that and to hear how painful that was, but to also know that that's not the end of the story, that obviously we know he was resurrected. After he dies on the cross, and I'll go into a lot more detail, obviously. Let me look and see how long I've been talking. I know that you wanted this video to be at least 30 minutes. I should have timed myself when I started. Station number 13 is when Jesus's body is removed from the cross so lovingly, and the treatment of his physical body by those who loved him with really symbolic ointments and oils and sacred things that they did to prepare his body for being placed in the tomb. And station 14 is when Jesus is placed in the tomb. Now, there are 3 possible locations, and we'll look at each one of those, and they're all really unique and special. And I felt the Spirit in each of those places. You know, I know some members of the church say, well, I can't feel the Spirit in Catholic cathedrals. I absolutely can, with those flying buttresses and those ceilings that practically reach up into the heavens. The archaeology, not the archaeology, the architecture of those buildings can absolutely pull your thoughts heavenward. I love that. And so, even though some of these sites are owned by or run by the Catholic Church, some of them are by the Armenian Catholic Church, some are by the Greek Orthodox Church. And I feel the Savior's touch in each of those places. And I really want the members who attend this particular presentation to really feel that as well. Now, again, he is placed in the tomb, and we'll talk about those sites. But of course, the big exciting ending of the story is that he was resurrected. Now, technically, the stations of the cross end with the tomb. They don't have a station saying, this is also where he was resurrected, but Christians obviously know that, and we'll obviously talk about that as well. Most all Catholics and many Christians will worship in that Church of the Holy Sepulchre as the place of resurrection. And then a lot of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will go over to the garden tomb and try to feel the Savior's spirit. It is a much calmer, quiet, outdoor garden location. And as members of the church, we associate artwork with the resurrection that absolutely seems to what's the word, provide that peaceful feeling there, whereas the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is dark and really loud and lots of tourists inside, but equally interesting. So of course we're going to end the class on a very happy note that I want to talk and end with how Jerusalem absolutely testifies of Jesus Christ in so many ways. And hopefully everybody will have their faith and testimony strengthened, and maybe someday be able to plan a trip to go to Jerusalem. Okay, so that is that presentation. And again, I don't know how long I've been talking, but let me quickly run over the other presentation. And again, I'd be thrilled to do it in a one-time class. I know you're probably wanting to test me to see if I'm any good, but hopefully you can tell from my enthusiasm that my classes will be very energized and fun and enlightening, insightful, and cause them to dive back into the scriptures. So the second one is exploring where Jesus walked, touring the Holy Land without jet lag. And this last year, 2025, this year, I attended BYU Education Week, of course, because I love it so much. And there was a class I attended about Italy, and I love Italy. Maybe next year I'll submit a presentation about Rome and hitting all of the sites where we know Peter and Paul went, and information about the Romans too, because Jesus definitely had a connection with the Romans. But anyway, I think that this little travel tourism guide like the one on Italy is going to be even better because it's about the Holy Land. And so I've organized it. Well, I'll read the quick description and then I'll just tell you how I organized it into 4 days. So my description says, this fun and inspiring course will help class members better visualize important locations in the Holy Land in Israel. We'll explore sites based on scriptural confirmation, archaeological evidence, symbolic significance, and there is so much, and Christian tradition. The 4-day course will travel in chronological order from the birth of Jesus Christ to his atoning sacrifice and death on the cross and triumphant resurrection. Now, I know sometimes, not sometimes, I think always, when tour groups travel, they will go by geography, and it's not necessarily in chronological order. And so I think that'll make this presentation also a little bit unique. Attendees will gain new insights by seeing the physical surroundings and cultural context of the places where the Savior lived and walked during his mortal ministry. The class has been designed to strengthen faith in Jesus Christ and his everlasting gospel. The Holy Land, as I said before, testifies of Jesus Christ in so many different ways. The topography, the actual sites, the lessons, the stones, the caves, the water, everything. It's really, really amazing. All right, so class Day one is called Visiting the Birthplace and Childhood of Jesus, What the Sites Teach Us About the Savior. So teaching point number one, I'm going to explore archaeological evidence versus traditional locations. And again, sort of like the Via Dolorosa, some we know for sure happened at a specific location, and others we know it's somewhere in the ballpark. And so it's important to look at both the archaeology and the scriptures. So we'll do that for each one of these things. Teaching point number two is we're going to start off in Bethlehem and take a look at the Church of the Nativity, where Christianity in general believes that's the actual place where that Jesus Christ was born. Now, whether or not that actually is the place, it's an opportunity to look at beautiful artwork and reflect on the birth. Nearby, we see the Shepherd's Field, which is my teaching point number three. And I think I may even have the class sing some Christmas carols or a verse of a Christmas carol as we talk about each of these elements of the birth of Jesus Christ. Let's see. Oh, and then this is about his childhood. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Nazareth. Now, we're not going to talk about Egypt because I'm really focusing on the Holy Land, although, of course, I'll mention that we know that he went to Egypt, but then he returned and really spent his childhood and teen years growing up in Nazareth. And so we'll talk about that. Of course, I'm going to show pictures and videos and talk about my personal experiences in all of these locations, just like I would do with Via Dolorosa. Class number two, day two. Oh, wait, and then I forgot, teaching point number five is Jesus in Jerusalem as a child. And I want to hit Jerusalem on each of these days because they talk to the points that I'm going to be making. So I'll spend just a little bit of time talking about the temple in Jerusalem because we know Jesus went there as a child. Okay, day two, class two is called Jesus Begins His Ministry, Key Locations in Israel where he declared his divinity. So we're going to start off with the baptism. Now, we could talk about the woman at the well. We don't know exactly where that well is, and I'll of course mention that, but we do know where the River Jordan is, and so we'll go there for sure and talk about Bethabara, which is another name. We call it today the Jordan River. And then teaching point number two is the Dead Sea as it relates to the Jordan River and some interesting insights on the lowest ocean sea on earth and how that's significant and symbolic. Then we're going to spend some time teaching point number three in in Galilee. So many things happened in Galilee, and I want the attendees to see what that looks like. The first time I went, I was like, oh, wow, this is it. I've seen it in paintings, of course, and even photographs, but being there just brings everything to life, which of course is why I want to teach both of these classes. Teaching point number four, we're going to run over to Magdala, which is on the Sea of Galilee, and share some really interesting experiences that I had watching people get baptized right there in the Sea of Galilee at Magdala, and how they had just recently uncovered some incredible archaeological evidence of a first century synagogue that Jesus could have preached at. We know that he was in the region of Magdala and he loved the Sea of Galilee, so he could have been there. And then, of course, Mary of Magdala. And I want to share some really special photos of the church and the hotel that have now been put on that site that are just so lovely. And they have the archaeological remains of this first century synagogue, and they built a beautiful replica of a synagogue inside this hotel compound, and it's just stunning. And some other really sweet, what's the right word? Some sweet testimonials. That's not right, the right word. Just some sweet shout outs to the women of Christ's life and what they've done there to honor the women in Jesus's life. That's the word I was looking for. And then we're going to run over to the Mount of Beatitudes. That's my teaching point number 5, and show what they believe could have been the hill where he taught the multitudes, and to look at that church that is now placed on that site where a lot of people go to think about that Sermon on the Mount and the lessons that are taught there. Teaching point number 6 is awesome. It's Caesarea Philippi, also called Banias. And wow, that site absolutely made scriptures pop in a new way I had never considered before. As do a lot of these locations, made me just have aha moments. So I'm really excited to talk about that particular location. Teaching point number 7 is back to Jerusalem, specifically to talk about, let's see, hold on, to talk about the ministry and the things that he said and did there. Okay, class 3, day 3 is the locations of Jesus's miracles and ministry. So that's why we're going back and forth to Jerusalem, because there were quite a few in Jerusalem. But we'll start off teaching point number 1, the wedding of Cana, which is his first official miracle, turning water into wine, and the rich symbolism in that miracle. Teaching point number 2 is Capernaum, healing of a centurion servant, healing of Peter's mother-in-law, and visiting a synagogue and doing some miracles there. Teaching point number 3 is Jericho and the Jericho Overlook, which is called the Wadi Kelt. Teaching point number 4, I know I'm running through these pretty quickly. I just kind of want you to see my thought process and how I'm trying to organize the structure of this presentation. Bethany and Bethesda, where we talk about raising Lazarus from the dead, healing a man who was born blind, and healing another blind man. And we'll talk about some of the traditions that place those healings there, or those and other healings there. Last point for day 3 is Jerusalem, back to Jerusalem, and we'll talk about the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda, which is in Jerusalem, cleansing of the temple, healing a man, blind from birth. Yeah, some of the other types of things. Locations are debated, and we'll talk about those and look at the considerations. And then day 4, the last day, is called Sacred Sites in Jerusalem, following the Via Dolorosa from condemnation to resurrection. Now, that is going to be kind of a condensed version of the Via Dolorosa presentation. I won't be able to go into nearly as much of the detail that I will on that other separate presentation, but just to let people who know, or people who attend this presentation, about the Via Dolorosa, because it does walk people quickly through the old city of Jerusalem. We'll start, however, in the upper room where the Last Supper occurred, and which is traditionally the location. And again, there's archaeological differences and debates, but it gives you a chance to experience what a room might have looked like that particular one. Then we'll also go from there over to the Mount of Olives in the Garden of Gethsemane. Those 3 places, the Last Supper in the upper room, the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane, are not part of the Via Dolorosa. They happen right before the traditional Via Dolorosa. So then I'll quickly walk them through all of the stations, and then we'll end triumphantly with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And again, pointing to how the Holy Land absolutely testifies of Jesus Christ. But also for both classes, a reminder that you don't have to physically go to Israel to be able to walk in Jesus's footsteps by the way that we live our lives, emulating what he taught us. And I want to make that really clear, that this is not, I don't have a travel and tourism company or anything like that. And I'm, would love everybody to go just because it is so amazing and life-changing. But all the lessons that we're going to talk about, you can absolutely pull out of the presentations without having stepped in a very scary part of the world right now, and the most sacred piece of real estate in the entire world. All right, that's it. Hopefully those presentations sound exciting, and hopefully I'll get an invitation to join you in 2026. I sure would love that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I have a million other presentations I would offer or could put together. I know some teachers teach lots of different classes on the application information it said just submit to. So that's why I'm just giving you two. All right. Thank you again so much. I don't know if you've even watched this to the very end, but if you did, thank you so much. Thank you for considering me as a presenter. And hopefully I will see you at BYU Education Week in 2026. Bye.